Thanks for coming. And I'm kind of here as a proxy in many respects for William Leonard Pickard. Is he a familiar character to everyone in this room? Or do you, a few people, yeah, got recognition. Leonard is 71 years old. He's 6'6" tall. He's a Berkeley and MIT academic. He's a Zen monk, and he's currently serving 2 life sentences without parole. And he's been in prison for 17 years in the American gulag system, high security prison, tiny little steel cell. And Leonard, this is Leonard here, and I came across Leonard's story just doing a little bit of research and kind of stumbled on this very arcane story that just goes on and on and on. And in the background was Leonard, who basically took the fall for which has allegedly been the world's biggest ever LSD bust and manufacturing operation, which I'm going to read some notes. I don't do very often, but let's go for that. The DEA considers the lab to be the largest in history, dwarfing earlier labs and resulting in the oft-quoted 90% reduction in the world's LSD supply. The lab could regularly produce enough LSD for every person in the Western Hemisphere, up to 3.8 billion hits of LSD, either at a time or something. All of these figures are, like any drug bust figures, hugely inflated and also very mixed up. And the thing is with Leonard, his position, his legal position is innocent, absolutely innocent of all charges. Yet at the same time, Leonard has a very long and complicated history, including going to prison for also producing LSD in the 1980s. And I've got a quote somewhere here. There's a really nice one there. It says, "Those that say don't know, and those that know don't say," which kind of sums up where we're at, because any conversations we have with Leonard are filtered through the American gulag system. So phone calls that we have are monitored, emails are monitored, everything. And Leonard has written an amazing and massive book, which is the Rose of Paracelsus, which, considering I'm doing a talk around Rose of Paracelsus, I haven't read yet. It's a very complex book. But we've got some experts here, but you know, this is there's a little detail. It's a psychedelic conference. We don't worry about such things. So I've got a greeting here. This is the second time in my life I've used PowerPoint, so bear with me. I recorded some phone calls because I actually all of us here, we've had phone calls with Leonard. And the thing is, it's the first time this happened when Leonard called me up, I put the phone down. I just thought, what just happened? It is heartbreaking. It is shocking. And when he describes the conditions and things like that, you know, even more so, but this guy. And so Leonard, he's got a better disposition to life than I have, and he's been in jail for 17 years. You know, he's positive, he's outlook, he's working all the time, he's constantly in contact with people from all over the place, and it's an amazing phenomenon. Let's see if this works here, which is a greeting from Leonard. Whoops, no, go back. Okay, my mouse is disappearing. Anyone know how to work PowerPoint?
Hello, dear friends. This is Leonard Pickard calling to send in my encouragement and greatest respect to all the researchers and participants at Breaking 17. It's been such a delight to hear of the advancements in research at North Carolina, Zurich, Imperial London, and NYU. On this end, I've been writing certain memories, and my gratitude to Ben Sessa, Simon, Greg Sams, and Nesse Deveneaux, who have a little present for you.
There we go. That's Leonard speaking to us directly here. And come along with me today, we've got Greg Sams, who I'm sure many of you know. Someone once described you, Greg, to me as psychedelic royalty in the background there. Greg's got such a history. I know many things that Greg's introduced to English culture, organic food, all sorts of things with his brother. I worked for the family business back in the mid-1970s. And Greg Borders the Veggie Burger, chaos theory explained in ways that no one else has ever done before. And his recent book, what's the book at the moment? We've got a copy here. Sun God.
Son of God.
Well, Son of God, sorry. Okay, there we go. Which thoroughly recommended, is on sale outside. There we go.
In the Arizona State Penitentiary Library now, courtesy of Leonard as well as my other book.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nasei is, would you like to tell us your speciality? Leonard says you are the foremost psychedelic literature expert in the world at the moment.
I'm not foremost, but one of them, yeah. And I'm a postdoc right now at the University of Puget Sound, where George also teaches. He hired me at that position, and I brought him now to Break a Good Mention. But yeah, I've been in touch. He reached out to me because he'd heard about me and my work, and we've been corresponding since last year. Yeah.
Thank you, Nasei. Just quickly, I work as a fine artist. That's kind of what I do, and work with politics and agitation propaganda, all sorts of things. And for instance, I sold a drug deal as an artwork many years ago. The biggest markup ever on a bag of cocaine, which was 400 quid's worth of cocaine sold to a collector for £20,000, which as a white bohemian intellectual artist, whatever, I get £20,000. If I was a black man in Alabama or Brixton, I'd get 20 years, hence the text spelling. Absolute hypocrisy, the hypocrisy that is imprisoning Leonard as we speak at the moment. And this is Leonard's book, The Rose of Paracelsus, on Secrets and Sacraments. And we're going to have some readings from the book. I've got readings from various people, and Nasei and Greg are going to be reading too. Thread.
Wait, can you go back to the cover just a second?
Yeah.
Because one thing, Leonard also has some Twitter accounts. I'm not sure who updates the accounts. Maybe it's the person who does his website. But one of the things he tweeted was, and you can't quite see it here, but he says the cover has a liquid spill on it, and there's a lot of symbology for all of the picture. But he says, what is that? What is that spill? And the implication is that, it's kind of like the book itself is doused in acid. And if you read the back cover, there's some of the testimonies will say, like, this is like mind-altering to read. So it's like the connection between the language and the psychedelics is very explicit in the book.
Mm-hmm. And researching for this talk and sort of my meeting with Leonard, because what's happened is we've become good friends. He's an incredibly charming person, and I speak to him almost daily through prison system and occasionally phone calls. And looking through, this is completely nothing to do with it, but it does say the word acid on it. But the whole world of acid manufacture, clandestine drug operations, the reality, the unreality, and everything, it's labyrinthine once you start to go down this route. And it's a route I've been interested in for various reasons, sort of going back to, this is Richard Kemp, who was the famous English chemist who got busted in Operation Julie in the mid-70s, which, when you start to research, has connections that go through to, perhaps to Leonard. Once again, we don't really know. Leonard has been a drug researcher and a sort of really acclaimed international researcher on drug prevalence, drug use, and drug things. He's traveled the world working for MIT and Berkeley University. And it just goes on and on. It's like Alice down the rabbit hole. And this character here is just the most unbelievable. I mean, just the look. This guy is called Ron Stark. Ron Stark was at one point one of the world's biggest suppliers of LSD. He was a person who worked with the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. He certainly was involved with setting up Operation Julie in England, with Orange Sunshine laboratories throughout Europe. And he was also involved with left-wing terrorists, right-wing terrorists, you name it. He was everywhere. CIA, FBI, MFI, BBC. He was just with everything. And we can't even begin to scratch the surface of this guy here, which takes us to Leonard Pickard, who, this gentle young man here, has somehow found himself 2 life sentences without parole. It's like, what? What is going on? What is going on in this world that this happened?
Are they consecutive life sentences?
We don't know. They haven't worked that out yet. I mean, whatever Leonard has done, the degree of fear that he has instilled in the forces that be of darkness is such that it's 2 lives. They won't even, they're making sure 2 lives. You know, this is, and thinking of the war on drugs, Leonard is a casualty of the war of drugs. And I like to think we're the resistance. You know, it's kind of like we are the other side of the war. There's a war against us if we're here at a psychedelic conference. By its very nature. This was Leonard's first laboratory that he probably had set up in 1988, and then eventually Leonard, the international academic, traveler around the world, he was organizing things like the return of Stinger missiles from the Taliban in Afghanistan. And during our contacts, I was in Kabul a couple of years ago on a project, and he said, well, if ever you go back, and he gave me this phone number, and I contacted the guy, and it was some warlord in Afghanistan who's a really good friend of Leonard's. You know, it's like, it just goes off in beyond direction.
I just read that part.
It's covered in the Rose of Paracelsus in some way. Let me see, where have we got up to now? Let's just deny that there. That we don't particularly need at the moment. We're doing I'm not very good at timing. I've taken, as a kind of friend of Leonard, I've been, you know, he's just released this book, and we've taken it here. We did a reading for the radio. I worked for Resonance FM, if any of you know, the world's greatest art radio station, 104.4 FM on your London dial. And we've made a recording of readings from the Rose of Paracelsus, and this is Oscar Wilde's jail cell. This is exactly where Oscar Wilde was in his imprisonment, and there's a real correlation between the prohibition of homosexuality and the prohibition perhaps of drugs, etc., etc., etc. Another moral prisoner, and this is his desk, books that Oscar Wilde actually had there. Going around, I've been doing various things with. This is Gilbert and George, who I met at some art show recently, and I said, let's have a picture for my friend Leonard, who's in jail. And when they said, what does he do? And I said, well, allegedly, he's the world's biggest LSD manufacturer. And they held up their champagne glass and said, he needs an award, not a prison sentence. It's quite appropriate. And also going round, Free Leonard Pickard, he's in this tiny little steel cell. He doesn't get to see anyone except gangs. He sees murders, he sees death. He's in a very, very restricted environment. And more than anything else, Leonard wants to see people. So something that we do, we just get some pictures and we send them in to him. And it brings a little bit of light. And tomorrow, Nikki's organising a photo thing down in reception area where we've got a nice... All day long. If you want to send a picture to Leonard, you want to send a message, a nice piece of slate, some coloured chalk, you can chalk your own message just like this, and we're going to send it to Leonard 25 at a time so we can reach in. And another little thing is that Leonard, right at this moment, he's so excited about being here by proxy, he's meditating right now. He said, I'm going to be meditating with you. So right now, we just think, just for a second, we can reach out. It's a nice thing. Okay, this one has got, this is Leonard. Actually, Greg, would you like to read now a section?
Okay.
It's going to be really chaotic because it's just my nature. But, you know, we've got lots of nice material. We'll give as much as we can. So just an initial reading from Greg, from the section that you chose, which I think gives us a nice grounding because it mentions prison.
And a few words before.
Okay, yeah, because Greg
that,
wants to introduce.
Just to say that we're all here today freely discussing substances and practices which are illegal throughout the world. So it is an appropriate time and place to honor those courageous people who risked their lives, their liberty, messed up their lifestyles in order to provide us with their sacred compounds, medicines, and without these people, there would be no Breaking Conventions conference, and many of us would never have experienced psychedelics. So next time we take these journeys, let's bear a bit of thought and send some love out and gratitude to the people who have made this all possible for us.
Yeah.
So this is a piece from late in the book. haven't quite reached this far yet myself, but 2/3 the way through. Evening storms were rolling in from the Pacific. One could smell the wild sea and hear the troubling sky. As I left for the Midwest, Sasha Anand's magical compound was high in the clouds, fitting away in whiteness. I worried about the meeting ahead, the strangeness of my new subject Skinner, his captive girl, the near-lethal drug mixtures he gave her, the coldness of his eyes. Events happened quickly, frightening, cataclysmic events with no warning. I didn't know on the endless journey to Kansas that soon I would be incarcerated for life, or that these very words would be written from a remote and forgotten prison cell, or that after a bleak decade, freezing and alone in a special housing unit beneath a maximum security federal prison, I sometimes would use my one monthly call to reach out to Sasha Anand. Even from this perspective of so many years entombed in cement and steel, I remember well the last night we spoke. I crouched beneath the narrow slit of a handcuff port in the 300-pound steel door of my cramped cell and held the phone for the permitted 15 minutes. I'm blind now, he confided, although Sasha's extended family throughout the world long had known. Galileo was blind the last 10 years of his life, I reminded him. Beloved by all that knew him, Sasha's life was truly blessed. Our last words together were not on chemistry, but on music. You could still play your balalaika, I told him. His father was Russian, the fine triangular instrument of family heirloom. Sasha was ambulatory somewhat, due to the loving care of Anne and his Tibetan women caregivers, who daily massaged his legs and guided him to sit in his beloved laboratory with friends and colleagues who came to honor him. How many balalaika strings are there, he asked. 6, I replied, uncertain. Actually, there are 3. That's right, he said, for he never discouraged anyone by asserting his knowledge. Then he said his final words to me. It was the last time I would ever hear his voice. There are heavenly harmonics, he said.
It's
You have his reading of that.
I have, yeah, and I just think we could play that now. Leonard wrote this book with paper and pencil. It's a massive book. It's really big, and apparently he wrote the book, wasn't satisfied, and destroyed it in minutes. He destroyed it in minutes, and then wrote the whole book again. It's just like there, and it's. We'll talk more about the text later, but now, really, I found it very moving. We've got a recording of Leonard reading from his book. Let's find the play button. Okay, fingers crossed.
Good. A gift for you, a little reading from the Rose. Set in a cafe in Salzburg, Austria, where chemist Indigo places his forehead to mine and induces a series of altered states of sounds, images, thoughts, and feelings. Here we are. He placed his hands together in prayer, then brought his forehead to mine. Listen, he said, 20.2 kilometers above the Serengeti, the quietness of a geospatial satellite. Low clouds and landmass rotating beneath. From the edge of the Ngorongoro crater, the high desert wind. Over Congo at Mai Denombe Lock, 10,000 snowy egrets rising as one. Over Laos, a bamboo flute played by a naked child, and the clapping of an old man in loincloth, the children of all the earth, jubilant, shrieking. Laplanders, Yakut, Arctic Inuits, Viennese crowds sobbing, trying to touch Beethoven's casket, howling dark wreckage of a dying planet. Silence of this precious island Earth moving through unfeeling space, so very alone. A single soprano singing Missa Solemnis. Look, he said, 15.1 kilometers above Vinson Massif, Antarctica, the last calvings of the Larsen Ice Shelf, sunrise over jungles of the Pantanal, moongate light upon Gobi Dunes, sunrise over the last hunter-gatherers, the Malaysian Bajau, the Tanzanian Hadza, the Zimani of Bolivian Amazon, sunrise over Yemen, the slums of Ash-Shab, moonrise over orphanages of Batambang, through rough camel skins of Bedouin tents, the divine brilliance of the Pleiades, sunrise over Kyrgyz boy milking yak in the Afghan Pamir Mountains, volcanic furnaces of Iceland, aurorae dancing, reflected in eyes of a newborn Aleut girl, stars gathering for the host, the far dawns of once and future centuries. Think, he said, all thought a sphere of 10 to the minus 21st centimeter, expanding to the diameter of an atom, to the Schwarzschild radius, beyond the edge of the universe. Every instant of comprehension, everlasting. The moment we all learn to tie our shoestring, an unborn girl in the womb of a destitute mother in a filthy favela on a Rio hillside, dreaming of the day her equations will revise the standard model, the ultimate intelligence of humble prayer. The fields of mind, all knowledge, all cognition, all senses, all understanding, everything, all at once, and dear God, the light. Feel, he said, sorrow, desire, joy, anger, hatred. 8-year-old lepers without faces in Bombay alleys, the endless tears of Christ, the irresistible hot river of a billion climaxes, the birth of angels. 2-year-old girl in El Paso being beaten to death for soiling her diaper. I have not the capacity to record further here this unspoken exchange, at once so familiar and fantastic. Almost as an act of mercy, he lifted his forehead from mine. It is finished. For now, he said. His words were gentle, barely heard. Like a night whisper, they were the caress of innocent clouds, like a blessing from a benevolent sorcerer. New recognitions arose with each of my heartbeats. I felt like a child hearing their first poem, as if it were the springtime of our mind.
Thank you, Leonard. We actually just got a text, or not a text, we just got an email from Leonard. He's really excited about this, so I'll check that out in a while. So I guess he wasn't meditating, he was dashing to the phone. And when a good point being that when he says he will have to go through all sorts of metal detectors several times a day, sometimes queuing 80 men's long to get through a door. And Greg told me a story which I've read further on. We talk about food. The food is appalling in the prisons. And he gets his food. He doesn't even get to see the person serving. It's through a little slot in the wall. And Greg's story reminded me that when Tim Scully, the other very well-known... Nick Sands, sorry, not Tim Scully. Nick Sands, the orange sunshine chemist, he was in jail and he got deliveries of liquid LSD. And what was the story?
He was in the canteen, and his job was sort of giving people their plates. And as he was dishing the plates out, he would say, one drop or two. And he said the whole prison erupted. People were singing and dancing and laughing and something. And the screws didn't know what to do. It was like metabolic against being happy in prison. And he cherishes that memory.
So
I thought perhaps that's why in Leonard's prison he doesn't get to see the people who serves him the food.
Yeah, yeah. bit by bit by bit. I'll try and read the email in a minute and bring it to you and see. But in the meantime, got just a greeting from. This is Johanna Harcourt-Smith. Many of you may be famous with, you'd be familiar with. She does a podcast now called Future Primitive, and she was married to Timothy Leary and was involved with Timothy Leary at the time when, going back to those convoluted, twisted turns of CIA, blah, 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 when the Weather Underground broke Timothy Leary out of jail, the Weather Underground being a left-wing terrorist hippie organization in America, who broke him out of jail. He went on the run, and Johanna had made a beeline. She was Swiss aristocrat who liked drugs and the swinging 60s, and she made a beeline for Timothy Leary and ended up becoming his common law wife and going on the run with him. They were both arrested in Kabul in 1970-something. At the behest. It was the very first rendition in many respects, because that was illegal. So we've got a little message from her. She'd love to be here today. Whoops. Go back one. Press play. Let's see if I can find it again. There it goes. This is from New Mexico.
So this is Johanna Harcourt-Smith, and greetings to everyone at Breaking Convention. And how I wish and long that I could be there with my tribe. And about 2 years ago, Leonard sent me his book, The Rose of Paracelsus, and I was very excited. Leonard is in prison, and he's serving 2 lives for whatever the government thinks is worse than murder, I guess. It's a mystery whether he did make LSD or didn't make LSD. But anyway, I love him. I read his book, and to me, the book, never mind whether he made psychedelics or didn't make psychedelics, the book is psychedelic to me. And what I mean by psychedelic is that the description and the depth and the poetry in this book exacerbates my senses, and page after page my assemblage point is moved in a way where I can see reality in a more beautiful and a more compassionate place. Leonard has written a 620-some pages book in prison with a pencil. And when I was with Timothy Leary, he was in prison for 3.5 years. And I know what that is. And I know what a deeply disturbing situation that is. So for Leonard to have written a book that is so transpersing with beauty and that speaks with such tenderness of many, many, many places on this planet where he has traveled, a book that penetrates the essence of reality and many clitorises of beauty in this world all over the planet in many facets, but mostly to read it has changed me and made me more aware, more tender, more devoured by the poignancy of life itself.
Thanks, Johanna. And back to the Rose, Nasay. Would you like to tell us a little bit about the book?
Yeah, maybe just as context. So it is, the main character in the book is Leonard Pickard, and it is fiction, but it happens to very closely follow the actual details of his life. So in many ways, it's comparable to the Shulgin's Pikal in the sense that fictional version of their life, but in a way that can be more honest through the fiction. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind. He intentionally does not answer the question of what is real and what is fiction, because he wants to leave it open, and also perhaps for legal reasons. But in terms of like, there's a lot of factually true parts of the book, and it's hard to read. Many parts, it's very most people might need a dictionary. He uses really big words, and I've been thinking of doing like an online reading group. So if anyone's interested in like going through, meeting every few weeks and talking about a chapter, let me know after. But what's interesting about it is that there are some very quotidian, everyday chapters. I mean, he goes off to Harvard for school, and in the Harvard chapters, he's like chugging away on his work and taking exams and like, rushing to study in the middle of the night. And then he'll jet off to some foreign place like Afghanistan or to Russia. And then one of the major premises of the book is that there's this underground network of psychedelic chemists who are essentially trying to save the world from the forces of entropy and evil. And they're very kind of turned on, enlightened beings, and as he enters their presence, his consciousness changes. And so it's like you're going through the everyday, we're at Harvard, we're taking classes, and all of a sudden it's just like, boom, and reality opens up in a crazy fractal, and it's just, the realism makes those moments like so much more impactful because you feel it coming out of regular reality. And so I think that's what Johanna was saying about, it affects the way that you perceive reality, because you're like, that normal reality that I was following along with him just folded out into this crazy fractal thing. And so it definitely, regularly, if you have the patience to kind of get through the depth, the density of the prose, I think it's definitely a really worthwhile experience.
To add to that, there's constantly on every chapter, there are things you want to look up. You say, wow, I never heard about this guy, or did this woman really exist? And they all do. Sometimes it's just one paragraph in some obscure book that Google has scanned there. And I found out, I only take that detour occasionally, but I found wonderful things from that.
And some of the historical things, like he called the fentanyl, like, has everyone heard about like the fentanyl crisis with the opioids and how it's like killing people? It's like this really strong opioid that's being mixed with heroin. So he said that was going to be a problem, like way before the government recognized it was a problem. Also with the Afghanistan story, there was this warlord figure who he befriended, and he got permission to bring him into Washington, D.C., and tried to say, like, hey, the Taliban is going to be a problem, and this guy can help have the Taliban not take over. And the people in DC were like, oh, what's the Taliban? And it's just a bunch of, wild hooligans out in the desert. And now historians say that moment was a potential time to circumvent what ended up happening with 9/11. So Leonard has been in these like really crucial moments in history and really kind of foresaw the way that things were going and tried to save things. So, I mean, for so many different reasons, it's a really fascinating read for sure.
Not just an alleged LSD manufacturer.
And Leonard also talks about the book as we can't take it as fiction and we can't take it as reality. It's something that just crosses over all of these paths, and it's beyond. And Leonard is now writing some new material. I think there's further stories. And did we talk about the six?
I just mentioned the chemist.
Okay, the chemist, because do you want to talk about the actual structure of the book, about the six chemists? And
so you hear, he's like, the premise is that he is like this drug researcher at Harvard, which is true, and he hears about this network of chemists, and he gets an in, and each of the chemists has a different name that's like a color, like a code name, so it's magenta and indigo, and he gradually comes across them as he's going about his life, and in very synchronistic, bizarre ways where he's like, how could they know that I was here? It's this kind of like magical element to it. And they're kind of like initiating him into this order. And you never meet like the final, or like the final chemist. There's like, it's kind of left up in the air. Who is this other chemist that he's mentioning?
The question is Leonard all of the chemists, or is Leonard one of the chemists? It's a mystery. But when you actually start looking into the documented history of LSD manufacture and things like that, there's very, very few. It's quite unique in drug manufacture. The closeness, the lack of busts to any large extent, considering the actual the sheer volume of LSD that is produced in the laboratory. I think a kilo is 10 million hits, something like that, and the figures, the notes, I mean, it just exponentially runs up. But should we say, has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask?
I didn't understand well how you first get in touch with Leonard.
I first got in contact with Leonard through a Vice documentary, actually. It was kind of, what's his name, Pharmacopoeia? Hamilton Morris, yeah, the Hamilton Morris for it. And there was this talk about a huge bust in an atomic missile silo in Kansas, which had been converted into a psychedelic pleasure palace as such. It actually sounds really crazy and vulgar and really kind of wrong. And in many respects, it's very strange in the story we have about Leonard, what we know of why Leonard was even involved with these people. Once again, you know, it's what was going on there. And the owner of the missile silo is the guy who actually turned Leonard in. And for various reasons, and he went on with complete immunity, and he is now serving life imprisonment for really horrific crimes afterwards. And Leonard said, you know, try not to talk about these people. You know, they're just like whatever. So I came across this story, looked at it, and realized there was a really interesting character in the background. And I sent an email to one of the many websites around Leonard Pickard, and I got an email back completely out of the blue. I didn't expect it. And he said, my God, I love your work. And it was like, wow, he likes, you know, this guy. And I said, well, I liked your work too, Leonard, I think. You know, it was a mutual appreciation went on there. And it means an awful lot to this guy. And the fact that there's almost certainly nothing we can do. You know, you saw pictures, free Leonard Pickard, that's really, you know, blowing into the wind, it really is. And there was a little bit of hope from Obama that he'd get one of the clemency things, because Obama actually released a number of people serving drug sentences, but unfortunately Leonard wasn't going to be one. And of course, the way things are going in America now, you know, who knows? Who knows? So that's the story, basically, of the Rose of Paracelsus and Leonard Pickard. It's something that you can all, you know, find an awful lot of online, and we're going to be putting more stuff together. That's my website. You'll be able to, there's not much there at the moment on Leonard. We're still working on it. He's got several websites that people have put up, but we're trying to, you know, find out a little bit more and give Leonard a voice in the world on a sort of more regular basis, apart from the book.